Miguel thought he had found the perfect partner in Fatima, but when his best friend Duarte uncovered a secret hidden deep within her past, their picture-perfect marriage in Lisbon spiraled into a nightmare of betrayal, obsession, and brutal violence. Fatima arrived in Lisbon on a rainy afternoon, carrying with her only a suitcase and the heavy hope of a fresh start. She had married Miguel after a whirlwind romance that began online, where their messages quickly turned into late-night calls and promises of forever. To Miguel, she was everything he had dreamed of, a graceful Moroccan woman with a quiet smile and a mysterious aura. To Fatima, he represented stability, freedom, and a new life far from the shadows of her past. Their wedding was small but beautiful, held in a quiet church with just a handful of guests. Miguel's family welcomed her warmly, though they noticed her reluctance to speak much about her life in Morocco. Whenever they asked, she smiled politely and steered the conversation elsewhere. In their Lisbon apartment, the couple settled into routines that looked picture-perfect from the outside. They strolled hand in hand through cobblestoned streets, shopped at local markets, and posed as though nothing in the world could disturb their harmony. The neighbors whispered admiration, describing Fatima as elegant and kind, but also distant. Some said her silence was due to language struggles. Others speculated she was simply shy. Whatever the reason, she remained something of an enigma, a woman who carried secrets in her eyes but never let them slip. Miguel adored her and dismissed any doubts. His best friend, Duarte, often joined them for dinner and watched quietly as Fatima spoke little, her voice soft, her eyes always avoiding his. He couldn't help but feel there was more beneath the surface, but he never voiced it. For now, Lisbon saw only a newlywed couple glowing with happiness. Behind closed doors, however, a fragile balance was forming, one destined to shatter. Miguel and Fatima quickly became a familiar sight in their Lisbon neighborhood. On weekends, they strolled together through the crowded plazas, pausing to admire street performers or to sip coffee at small cafes tucked between colorful buildings. To those watching, they looked inseparable, the kind of couple that turned heads for their harmony and beauty. Miguel, tall and confident, often carried the shopping bags while Fatima walked beside him with a quiet grace. She wore modest clothing, often long dresses and shawls that concealed her figure, which neighbors interpreted as cultural tradition rather than personal choice. His family often invited them to gatherings, eager to know more about the woman who had stolen Miguel's heart. At first, Fatima agreed, smiling gently as she sat at long dining tables filled with laughter, wine, and traditional Portuguese food. But as the conversations turned more personal, she became reserved. When asked about her childhood or family in Morocco, she provided vague answers and shifted attention back to Miguel. Gradually, she began avoiding these gatherings altogether, claiming she felt uncomfortable or unwell. Miguel defended her, insisting she needed time to adjust, though his mother raised eyebrows at her absence. Despite the whispers, Miguel continued to showcase their relationship proudly. He held Fatima's hand firmly as they walked through the markets, as though reassuring her, and perhaps himself, that nothing could shake their bond. Neighbors admired their outward devotion, often commenting on how lucky Miguel was. Still, some noticed that Fatima never joined women in neighborhood chats or activities. She remained apart, like a shadow moving gracefully but keeping her distance. For Miguel, the image of perfection outweighed any small doubts. For Fatima, every public appearance was carefully performed, a balancing act between hiding her truth and maintaining the role she had chosen. Duarte had known Miguel since childhood, their friendship forged in schoolyards and carried into adulthood. He had celebrated Miguel's wedding with genuine happiness, but as time passed, an unease began to creep in whenever he was around Fatima. She was polite, always greeting him with courtesy, yet there was a distance in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. Unlike most newlyweds, she never shared light-hearted stories, never laughed freely, and never seemed entirely present. The silence surrounding her was like a wall Duarte couldn't see past, and it troubled him more than he cared to admit. He started noticing little details that unsettled him. Fatima never changed clothes in front of anyone, not even briefly when they went on a seaside trip. She always excused herself, returning fully dressed, her shawls pulled tightly around her. When Miguel suggested they go swimming at the beach, Fatima refused, blaming the cold or saying she didn't feel well. Even during the hottest Lisbon afternoons, she remained covered, which struck Duarte as unusual. He tried to dismiss these thoughts, telling himself it was cultural modesty, yet the doubts lingered. Late at night, Duarte replayed his encounters with Fatima in his mind, asking himself why she seemed so guarded. He wondered if Miguel noticed, or if love had blinded his friend to the strange details. Sometimes, Duarte caught Fatima looking at him with a fleeting intensity, almost as if she feared he would uncover something she had hidden. That gaze unsettled him more than her silence. Though he had no proof of anything, his instincts told him something was wrong. A sense of unfinished mystery surrounded her, and while Miguel celebrated their perfect marriage, Duarte's curiosity only grew stronger. He felt compelled to search deeper, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. One warm afternoon, Duarte's suspicions pushed him further than idle curiosity. When Fatima slipped out of the apartment alone, claiming she was going shopping, he decided to follow her discreetly. She walked with careful steps through winding Lisbon streets until she reached a quiet neighborhood far from their usual haunts. There, she entered a small, unmarked clinic tucked between a bakery and an old bookstore. Duarte lingered nearby, unsettled by the secrecy of her visit. Why would she go to such a place without telling Miguel? His curiosity intensified, and through a friend who worked part-time at the clinic, Duarte managed to learn more. It took some coaxing and favors, but eventually he was handed access to confidential files. What he read made his stomach twist. The documents were medical records from Casablanca, detailing a series of procedures Fatima had undergone years earlier. They revealed that she had been born male and had gone through extensive surgeries to transition into the woman she now presented herself as. The paperwork described hormone treatments, operations, and follow-up appointments that explained her continued visits. Duarte stared at the pages, his heart racing. The discovery was heavier than anything he had expected. He thought about Miguel, his lifelong friend, who spoke of Fatima with such love and pride. How could he tell him this truth without shattering everything? Duarte felt caught between loyalty to Miguel and an uneasy respect for Fatima's privacy. He knew the information was explosive, capable of tearing lives apart. As he left the clinic, clutching the knowledge like a burden, Duarte realized he could never look at Fatima the same way again. What had once been mystery was now a secret so profound it felt dangerous. For the first time, he questioned what consequences his curiosity might unleash. Duarte spent sleepless nights wrestling with the secret he had uncovered. Each time he saw Miguel smile while speaking about Fatima, the weight in his chest grew heavier. He imagined his friend's reaction if he ever discovered the truth on his own. Anger, betrayal, devastation. Duarte's loyalty to Miguel gnawed at him, but so did the knowledge that revealing Fatima's past could destroy a fragile peace. Every path seemed wrong, yet the thought of silence felt unbearable. He tried to distance himself, skipping visits and avoiding Miguel's calls, but his absence only made Miguel curious. Eventually, Duarte convinced himself that honesty was the only choice. Miguel deserved to know, even if the truth would cut deeply. With trembling hands, Duarte gathered the medical files he had taken and placed them inside a plain envelope. He stared at it for hours before finally deciding to deliver it. One evening, after sharing drinks at Miguel's apartment, Duarte slipped the envelope onto the table between them. His eyes avoided Miguel's as he muttered that there was something important he should see. Miguel, puzzled, opened it casually at first, but as his eyes scanned the words, his expression darkened. Confusion spread across his face, followed quickly by disbelief. Duarte could almost hear his friend's heart breaking in the silence that followed. Miguel's hands shook as he read, then reread the documents, searching for any sign of mistake. Duarte urged him to be careful, to think before acting, but the damage was done. The world Miguel thought he knew was collapsing around him. Duarte felt sick with guilt, but convinced himself he had done what was right. What he couldn't foresee was how violently Miguel's life, and Fatima's, would unravel because of that decision. The truth, once exposed, had no way of being undone. Miguel's life unraveled the moment he read the documents Duarte had given him. At first, he refused to believe them, convincing himself that it must have been some cruel mistake or even a deliberate lie. But the more he looked at the details, the dates, the medical terms, the foreign signatures, the harder it became to deny. He began replaying every memory with Fatima, scrutinizing the smallest gestures. The way she avoided intimacy during certain times, her reluctance to attend family gatherings, her refusal to swim or change clothes in public. It all seemed to fit into a puzzle he hadn't realized was there. The disbelief soon turned into obsession. Miguel found himself staring at Fatima when she wasn't looking, searching her face for hints of deception. He grew restless at night, pacing the apartment while she slept. His temper became shorter, flaring up at minor things he once overlooked. Neighbors began to notice changes in him, his once easy smile replaced by a brooding silence. Fatima, sensitive to his moods, sensed that something was wrong but couldn't understand what had shifted. She felt his distance grow heavier with each passing day. Miguel started drinking more heavily, as if drowning himself could erase the storm inside his mind. He stopped talking to Duarte, consumed by the knowledge that his best friend had uncovered a truth he himself wished had remained buried. The love he had once felt for Fatima tangled itself with rage, confusion, and humiliation. He felt tricked, not just by her, but by the image of their marriage he had proudly displayed to everyone. The more he dwelled on it, the less he could think clearly. Reason slipped away, replaced by a single, festering thought, that Fatima had betrayed him in a way he could never forgive. The storm that had been brewing inside Miguel finally erupted one evening when the silence between him and Fatima grew unbearable. For days he had avoided her eyes, his words sharp, his gestures cold. Fatima tried to reach him, asking softly if something was wrong, but her questions only deepened his fury. Every glance at her felt like a reminder of the truth Duarte had placed in his hands. The resentment built until it became unbearable, and on that night, it spilled over. Inside their Lisbon apartment, the tension snapped. Miguel's anger boiled into violent action, his hands trembling not with fear, but with unrestrained rage. He struck out, the force of his emotions turning into physical blows. Fatima, stunned and terrified, tried to shield herself, but the attack was merciless. Furniture overturned, dishes shattered, and the quiet home that had once seemed like a sanctuary was transformed into a scene of chaos. The muffled thuds and cries reached the ears of neighbors through the thin walls, but most dismissed it as yet another argument, choosing to turn away rather than intervene. For Fatima, the attack was more than just violence. It was the collapse of the life she had tried so carefully to build. She felt the weight of her secrets crashing down alongside the pain of Miguel's rage. Every attempt to plead or escape was met with more fury, until she could no longer fight back. Miguel's face, once filled with affection, now looked unrecognizable, twisted by betrayal and hate. By the time silence returned, the apartment was wrecked, and Fatima lay broken and bleeding. Miguel stood over her, his breath ragged, his hands stained with the evidence of his rage. The man who once swore to protect her had become the very force that nearly destroyed her. Hours passed before the quiet of the building was disturbed again. Miguel stumbled out of the apartment just before dawn, his clothes soaked in blood, his face pale and expression vacant. He wandered into the street like a man lost, his steps uneven, his mind fractured. Startled neighbors saw him and froze, some whispering, others hurrying back inside. One woman, horrified at the sight, called the police. Within minutes, patrol cars arrived, their sirens shattering the early morning silence. When officers entered the apartment, the scene they uncovered was harrowing. Fatima lay on the floor amidst shattered glass and overturned furniture, her body bruised and battered but still clinging to life. Blood streaked the walls, pooling beneath her as paramedics rushed to stabilize her fragile condition. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow, her pulse weak. The rescuers worked with urgency, carrying her onto a stretcher and rushing her to the hospital. The sight stunned the neighbors who gathered outside. Many had long admired the couple, never suspecting the violence that lurked behind their closed doors. Whispers quickly spread through the crowd as Miguel was handcuffed and led to a police car, his head bowed, his face drained of emotion. Duarte, awakened by frantic calls, arrived at the scene just in time to witness his friend's arrest. The guilt hit him with crushing force. He realized his decision to reveal the secret had set off a chain of events that now seemed irreversible. The police documented every detail of the wrecked apartment, their cameras flashing over broken dishes, scattered papers, and streaks of red. For them, it was evidence of attempted murder. For those who knew the couple, it was a shocking revelation that behind the mask of love and perfection, a nightmare had been hiding in plain sight. At the hospital, doctors fought tirelessly to save Fatima. She had suffered severe injuries, but against the odds, she clung to life. Machines beeped steadily in the sterile room as surgeons worked through the night, stitching wounds and stabilizing her fragile body. Outside, reporters had already begun to gather, tipped off by police chatter. By morning, headlines were splashed across news outlets, turning a private tragedy into a national scandal. The words were cruel, focusing less on the violence she endured and more on the revelation of her past. The truth about Fatima's history was no longer confined to medical records. Leaked documents confirmed that she had been born male before transitioning, a fact that spread rapidly across Portugal and beyond. Tabloids used the story to sell copies, while talk shows dissected every detail, turning her pain into entertainment. Social media erupted with harsh debates. Some voices expressed sympathy, but many others hurled accusations, ridicule, and judgment. What should have remained her personal journey became a spectacle under the harshest spotlight. Miguel's arrest only fueled the frenzy. Some painted him as a betrayed husband, while others condemned him as a violent criminal who had no excuse for what he had done. Duarte, caught in the middle, stayed silent, though the weight of his involvement pressed heavily on his conscience. He knew he had played a part in exposing a truth that Fatima had carefully guarded, and now that truth had nearly cost her life. Fatima, lying in her hospital bed, became the unwilling center of a storm. Stripped of privacy and dignity, she faced not only the trauma of Miguel's attack, but also the judgment of an entire society. For her, survival was no longer just about healing. It was about enduring the world's unrelenting scrutiny. Fatima eventually regained consciousness in the hospital, her body covered in scars that told the story of Miguel's rage. Every movement brought pain, yet the emotional wounds cut far deeper than the physical ones. She struggled with the reality that her most private truth had been dragged into the public eye, twisted into headlines that reduced her life to gossip and scandal. The home she had built in Lisbon was gone, her marriage destroyed, her dignity dissected by strangers who judged her without understanding her journey. Miguel, meanwhile, was transferred to a Lisbon prison, facing charges of attempted murder. His once proud image as a devoted husband collapsed in courtrooms where prosecutors painted him as a man who allowed anger and humiliation to justify violence. Though his lawyers tried to argue betrayal, the brutality of his actions overshadowed every defense. The community that once admired him now recoiled in shock, unwilling to reconcile the man they knew with the crime he had committed. Duarte became a ghost of himself. Tormented by guilt, he avoided friends, neighbors, and even his own reflection. He had wanted to protect Miguel, but instead, his decision had destroyed them all. Watching Fatima's face appear on nightly news reports, pale and broken in hospital photos, he wondered if silence would have spared her the suffering. In the aftermath, Fatima faced a long road of recovery. Physically, doctors assured her she would heal with time. Emotionally, however, she was left with scars that no treatment could erase. The betrayal, the violence, and the exposure of her identity left her forever changed. The tragedy became a grim reminder that secrets, once revealed, can unravel lives in ways no one can control. Fatima survived, but survival came at a devastating cost that would follow her forever.